Waruingi, the founder and creative director of Akoia Co. So there's one thing I just wanted to tell you about Akoia Co. is our focus in all this making is partnering up with others, literally looking for good collaborations rather than trying to rebuild everything from scratch, where we can work with other partners who are interested in the work that we're doing. And we're committed to producing and curating projects at the intersection of art, culture, immersive media, and gaming. I have recently expanded this enterprise to Montreal, Canada, to continue to center Black, African, Indigenous, and Brown storytelling and art practices in our work. So the company there is called La Perle Noire Immersive, and our mantra is imagine radically, and our prime directive, come play. So before we dive in, I have a confession to make. I am a non-gamer who makes games. So I will show you how I got there. So I present to you 3 interactive immersive experiences that influence the development of the multi-platform gaming experience, The Ground Screams to Whisper. So first we have Indulgence, which was showcased at Johannesburg Art Gallery as Close. Then Found Footage, which is a meditation on African influence along the Indian Ocean coastline. And NOMA, the first ever extended reality experience in Nairobi. I was really proud of that because it broke attendance records across generations. Curating and producing immersive and interactive experiences is an arduous journey that takes, it's at the expense of one's sanity. Still, my favorite problem to solve in experience making is centering the audience. With immersive and interactive experiences, we sometimes get caught up in the technocentricity. We are more excited about the machine than ourselves making use of it. It makes me think of a quote from 1991's Cyborg Manifesto by Donna Haraway. Late 20th century machines have made thoroughly ambiguous the difference between natural and artificial, mind and body, self-developing and externally designed, and many other distinctions that used to apply to organisms and machines. Our machines are disturbingly lively, and we ourselves frighteningly inert. Unfortunately, with this approach, we alienate our audiences, we alienate our players, the very people we want to use the machines to experience the work. And so with the audience journey and access in mind, at Akoia, with all our great partners, we tailor enjoyable audience experiences that grew engagement and increase participation. In essence, we amp up the play, which is our prime directive. I'll begin with Indulgence, which I curated and produced in 2018. Indulgence wove multiple stories of sexualities, genders, and desires in an African context. It explored fluidities, possibilities, and evolutions. The exhibition traveled to South Africa as the exhibition closed, showcasing at the Johannesburg Art Gallery. We were honored because Close was part of the programming Celebrating Africa Month, which commemorates the founding of the OAU, which is now the African Union, on May 25th, 1963 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Well, this was my second exhibition. It was the first instance that I began to think of how to include the documentation of the art-making and knowledge-making processes. How do I make this an experience? I mounted tablets around the space to share different aspects of the exhibition. I shared the concept notes, exhibition summary, anything to let people know how we got there. One of the artists we can see up there, Yaya Kasamali, also included process photos of her sculptural work, and I included my own research for the audience to know how we got there thematically. And to show how the sausage is made, I shared photos from the installation process. The gentleman you see up there has been very integral to the visual arts culture in Nairobi. His name is Kamau. He has been stretching canvases and mounting things for over 20 or 30 years. So there's history happening up there. And, you know, until even the hanging up to the vinyl setup. It gets ugly before it gets pretty. With Indulgence, I was testing simple ways to get the audience to claim space, scroll to the art, and get involved behind the scenes. What excited me about this experience was that people really got into it, talked with each other about what they read in the tablets and how they perceived the work. It was a joy to see. Next, I give you found footage. This was my first exhibition, which I co-curated with Don Anda, who is now the curator at NCAI, the Nairobi Contemporary Art Institute. The year is 2017. Found footage is a preface to the curatorial project Crossings and Moorings, an immersive multimedia exhibition exploring historical movement of people and the transmission and transformation of identities across geography and time, with a focus on the cultures of the Indian Ocean coast, taking as its starting point the Afro-Iran project by the German-Iranian photographer Mahdi Asai. Found footage experimented with storytelling by including images from work by the award-winning documentary photographer Migwen Thiga. And with it, we were weaving narratives of everyday movement and interaction within and among existing cultures along the Indian Ocean coast. Found footage also showcased archival images from contributors like Nidhi Mahajan and the Friends of Fort Jesus. With this exhibition, I wanted to immerse people in the soundscape of the lull and bustle of an ocean town. I wanted them to feel like they might spot an ancestor or distant relative as they meander through the exhibition, listening to the sounds of the market, calls to prayer, and ocean waves, evoking many pasts and presents. The immersion was created through the sound design to conjure up that ocean town atmosphere. Sometimes it's nothing fancy, just an ingenious sound designer and well-positioned speakers. Found footage was my foray into thinking through what I wanted the audience to do, and Indulgence tested what I wanted the audience to feel. And all these are key components of creating an XR experience and also making a game. And now I'll welcome you to NOMA, an XR experience, which showcased the phenomenal experiments from 7 visual artists from Nairobi: Ngene Maura, Michael Musyoka, Petera Sudunde, Imaus Kimani, Sila Mwake, Ijaka, and Vergodi. I know to some of you, maybe it makes no sense, but keep their names in mind. You might see a lot of their work coming up to South Africa soon. So. The artwork was created using Google VR tools and Cinema 4D. This was an exciting experience and tons of people attended. What would have been a grand showcase of the technology was instead a deeply participatory experience for the audience. To keep them moving and waiting patiently to use the headset, I devised card games that you can see there. There are lots of different cards, where they had to find other people to complete a deck of cards with the artist's work. And when they completed the deck of cards, they got a deck of cards each as a gift. So you walked away with free merch. And there was a craft section where you can see you can make a dodecagon, which you took home as an exhibition, a souvenir. And I was surprised to see how much adults enjoy making one. And with that dodecagon, you actually had quotes from the artist and the exhibition playlist. So you went away with music curated by a DJ. And because of all this audience outreach, the giveaways and all of that, NOMA was groundbreaking because their record attendance was across demographics, which was very heartening because we make the assumptions about our audiences and players when it comes to digital technologies. We tend to think that we're only catering to a younger audience, but turns out that older people show up too. And people that we tend to think would be interested are actually the people who come back. And that was so interesting is, yes, we opened to 200 people, which was great, but the people who came back were like 20 and 30, of which 5 came back with 5 other friends. So it was a very interesting thing, and that's how I've continued to think about audience and how we set that up. So Indulgence, Found Footage, and NOMA demonstrated experiences in what you want your audience to feel and do. Having enjoyed myself thoroughly with that, I took on the next frontier, making games. Welcome to The Ground Screams to Whisper. The idea became a worm in my head in early 2020, but my desire to make games started in 1998. I play Mortal Kombat. I know in my soul that that is not what I want for me, but I want to play. I do, just not this. I have a brief flirtation with Assassin's Creed, but I move on. Many careers later, here I am, absolutely thrilled to be developing a VR game coupled with a location-based experience and creating audience development outreach through mobile puzzle games and interactive graphic novellas. Along with me for this experiment are my collaborators. That's the African digital heritage. So what's really important for us with The Ground Screams to Whisper and how we've been developing projects is that we are heavy on the research, so we partner with like research institutes so that we're not just formulating our own ideas about life or actually verifying certain things and creating some sense of veracity, and I hate to use a word, but some sense of authenticity on the things that we're going to expound on or make into fantasy or whatever. So, so African digital heritage, so that, as I said, with available histories and mythologies, they can have like a wide net cast. We have Letty Arts for the puzzle game and the interactive novella because we already have the infrastructure, and Punta Content, which is a technical lead building the VR world. And I'm crossing my fingers because I'm going to be meeting the African Astronomical Society on Monday, and we had started this conversation in 2021. And they have done a lot in terms of researching cultural astronomies, which is key to the world building of the Ground Screams to Whisper universe. So yeah, just keep me in your thoughts and prayers. And so before I continue, because what you're gonna see is kind of like a mood board that we've come up with, but there's one image that it's not the art department, it's the creative director, and that's me. The art department is not liable for how awful it looks. So I'd like to give a shout out to Sasha Vreka in Canada, Javier Acosta in Colombia, and Shabet Nava in Kenya, who have led at different moments on the artistic direction and really helped carve and shape in different ways our ideas around The Ground Screams to Whisper. And that's one of it. It's an Afro-Gothic gaming experience showcasing the everyday resistances of female freedom fighters against settler colonialism. It is influenced by African cosmologies, folklore, and magical realism. I live in Karen, a former coffee plantation. Because Kikuyu women were integral to the British imperial production of coffee through forced labor and violence, I'm interested in the often erased stories in our mythical project of Kenyan independence that removes women's participation, crowning men as the active ones and the founding fathers. Yet we hear nothing about the riots, often led by women, which confounded the British male colonial administration with reportage like this. So there was more rioting in Nigeria, everybody's like the poor Oga, and 49 deaths, but usually the deaths are not linked to the people who are working the plantations. It's either the settlers or the people who were useful. And so that's also part of how this become part of the game, just to let you know. So it's really important. So entering the universe of the VR game, you encounter different worlds of experience. And so how you start is that you begin as the character Riziki, and this is one of our experiments with how she would look like. And as you look at the different figures, we're also figuring out because at times we get caught up in the racialized features discussions when it comes to people. For us, we were thinking about what would it be to represent, let's say, a Maasai woman. Like for example, the earrings I'm wearing, what makes them Maasai earrings is the metal at the end of it. If you come to Kenya, you will find most of them without it, but usually Maasai people, like the people who make it where they are, usually add that, and that's, so we'll start thinking through more ornamentation, less about the features. So those are kind of some of the tests that we're looking at. So what happens is Riziki uproots a sapling on a former coffee plantation. And in doing so, she breaks the veil between the living and the in-between world. And this launches her on an adventure where she selects a world. So as Riziki, you select a world. And each world represents one of the 3 different women who were murdered on the plantation. And what you must do is repair the world as Riziki, so that they, the different women, may cross over into the world of their ancestors, or you remain trapped in the in-between world forever. And we kind of started thinking through what different types of interaction with all the historical and the historical, cosmological, constellation, colonial ordinances. So it's just, we're trying to make it as fun as possible for people to get across this world. And we have different levels of interactions. So going back, you remember seeing the newspaper clipping, right? So those are some of the objects that you get to play with to activate the worlds. The different melodies, I have a special place for art directors and sound designers, composers, so sound becomes a very important, the soundscape becomes a very important part of it in activating the world. The player will then interact with these objects and use them to map their way to freedom. And in the end, I mean, in terms of training, you increase your level of interactivity, you understand how the game works, and you hopefully enjoy yourself. And you must complete the actions though before the mist set in. So there is a previous photo there that shows you a coffee plantation with all the mists, and that is part of the world that we're creating where the mists come in. So that is part of the VR game, and this is something that I wanted to show you. We haven't gone into that aspect, which is looking at the constellations, and I get to use my pointer. So this is Pleiades, yes. And the mobile puzzle game, which is also targeting families, so children, that's something that has come up where I'm asked with my work, is there a child's version? Do you have something I can play with my kids or something like that? And one of it is that this is a constellation, right? And it will come with integral story elements. So I'll tell you about this constellation, which is typically a Greco-Roman reference, Pleiades. But according to the Namakwas, the Pleiades there, which in Greco-Roman astronomy is the Seven Sisters, were the daughters of the sky god. When the husband, this is the husband there, Aldebaran, shot his arrow, which is now Orion's belt, there. Orion's sword at the three zebras. This is now, so according to the Namakwas, what we look at Orion's belt are the three zebras. So just talking about using this type of stories and integrating them into the puzzle game, but having your own cultural references. And that becomes a very integral part of how we start to showcase our own cultures in this type of games, and particularly looking at children's games. So it goes on that Betelgeuse, there he is a fierce lion, and it's a very brilliant, it's a red brilliant star. So you can see from their own cultural references what they used to tell the star system and the constellations. And so the arrow is shot at this fierce lion, which sat watching the zebras. There he sits still, shivering in the cold night and suffering thirst and hunger. So that's the story of this constellation, but told from the Namakwa's point of view, which is, as I said, that's what we're going into. And so also I was inspired to create the graphic novella to flesh out the characters of the game. That's Riziki, Mukami, and Yokabi, speaking aloud silences and erasures of women's participation, and particularly also the cultural link to land as custodians and protectors, and part of environmental histories that we don't really talk a lot about. And I didn't realize that I was practicing what Saidiya V. Hartman calls critical fabulation, which redresses history's omissions using storytelling to imagine not only what was, but what could be. And that's a quote from Saidiya. And we can read it, but the essence of it is also looking at how the potential of doing that and working with histories and stories and just placing ourselves in a different headspace in terms of critical cultural theory, we're able to become more elastic around the stories that we tell and the experiences that we create. So, can someone tell me what we're looking at? Like the whole thing.
Trees in the snow.
Trees in the snow? Yeah, anyone else? No, it's okay. Like, this is not a trick question. You're actually seeing what you see. So trees in the snow. Yeah? We can agree on that? It's not a trick question, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, yes, it is trees in the snow. And back there is a porta potty. But the point is, it was a snowstorm in Montreal. And I was sent this. I cut it out. But why I'm putting this up is that usually when you think of Africa, you don't think of snow, usually. So the story, The Ground Screams to Whisper, is set in Kikuyu culture, Kikuyu women. But the one thing that we don't really get into is that the Kikuyu prayed to a snow-capped mountain and believed that God, and who we call Gai, resided there. So why would it be difficult to imagine a world with snow and it being part of an African game very easily, instead of, colonial game hunting inspired fever dream of the savannah and the orange sun and all of that. So yay, thank you. 100% for audience participation. And so these are some of the things that I think are really interesting also about working with the people that I work with. They come from different cultures and they speak different ways into imagining what we're working on right now, The Ground Screams to Whisper, and it's really exciting because I got sent this and I'm like, yeah, we'll have to develop a world of experience that plays with this idea. As you have seen, a lot of the images that I have been mostly, they're around more vegetation, less around the savannah, they're more around mist, they're a little bit different, so really kind of rethinking ways that we look at the environment around us. So all these elements that come together are also responses to audiences, players, participants from previous experiences asking where else they can access this and how else, and can it be in the form, with technology that they actually have access to. It is my desire for the audience to feel, know that they are and can shape experiences. Because without them, this is all dead, inert, lifeless. So, before I go, it's going to be whether you get 100%. I leave you with a quote with the late, great Bell Hooks, whose radical feminist principles guide our work. So please join me in reading this. The function of art is
to do more than
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.